The church felt heavier than winter itself. Friends and neighbors lined the pews, saying goodbye to 8-year-old Liam, the kid everyone loved. Then it happened. Woof, woof, woof! A German shepherd burst through the side door, sprinted down the aisle, and planted his paws against the white casket, barking straight at the heart. Gasps, footsteps. A security guard stepped forward until a firm voice cut through the hush. Stop! He's not here to cause trouble. He's warning us. The room froze. Who is this dog? Who is that man? And what truth could be pounding beneath a sealed lid? Before we begin, hit subscribe so you won't miss stories that remind us what courage, and maybe miracles, look like. Now, let's start. Snow hung like held breath over Willow Pass, a mountain town that had learned to whisper in winter. The river wore a dull sheet of glass, the pines wore powdered crowns, and the houses tried to look brave beneath the pewter sky. In the yellow house on Birch Lane, a boy moved as if sound cost money. Liam Carter, 8 years old, narrow-shouldered, hair the color of overdone toast, eyes winter blue and older than they should be, had perfected the art of taking up little space. He folded his hands when they trembled, folded his words when they might spill, folded his grief like a map he couldn't stop refolding. 2 winters ago, his father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter of the United States Marine Corps, had not come back from coordinates that had a name only on the lips of soldiers. One black November later, his mother, Eliza Hart Carter, a 4th-grade teacher with ink on her fingers and freckles arranged like stray constellations, did not come back from a patch of ice that forgot where the road ended. Grief didn't knock. It took the best chair and taught the clocks new tricks. The county said family, and family meant Marla Carter Hale, Daniel's half-sister. Marla was 33, tall and reed slender, a woman whose ash-blonde hair was braided tight enough to pass inspection. Her skin had winter's chalk, her lipstick was a brittle permission to smile, and her eyes, gray, watchful, kept lists. To neighbors she was pleasant in a window display way. Cookies in cellophane, a sprinkle of compliments, a phrasing that made duty sound like kindness. Inside, she loved order the way some people love hymns. Lights out at 8, shoes lined heel to heel, gratitude spoken like grace even when it scraped the throat. She seemed to believe that if everything were neat enough, sorrow would run out of places to hide. Victor Hale, 35, moved like a man aware of his broadness. Thick forearms nicked by years around lumber, a close-cropped brown fade conceding early silver, a trimmed beard trying to square a face already squared. His nose had been broken once, an argument with a chain, or a bar, or luck, and healed into permanent caution. He liked the handshake you could see coming, and the bill that added up. A failed mill expansion and the flirtation with bankruptcy that followed had salted him against softness. In public he was hearty, a man who negotiated with weather and always got a fair price. In private, his temper didn't flare so much as click shut like a cash box. He told himself he meant well. He told himself boys grew by pushing against walls. There had been a 4th heartbeat in the house, until there wasn't. Aegis, Daniel's German shepherd, retired military working dog, was 9 and still carried the dignity of rank. 85 lean pounds beneath a winter-heavy coat the color of wheat and old copper, a black saddle across his back like a dusk thrown over daylight. A pale scar angled across his muzzle, a notch in the right, ear and eyes the dark of coffee that had time to consider you. He moved as if a metronome had blessed his joints. Around strangers he wore a watchful neutrality that read as courtesy. Around Liam, he was devotion distilled. Marla claimed an allergy that never coughed, and a nose that said the house smelled like wet log cabin. Victor said a boy must learn to be strong without crutches. Aegis listened to the command, tilted his head once, translating the moral of it, and walked to the door. He did not go far. Beyond the fence, the neighborhood rubbed shoulders with forest. Aegis selected a hollow between 3 young firs with a clean line of sight to Liam's second-floor window, and made himself a station. Each night he lay sphinx still, nose to the wind, ears pricked in a geometry of vigilance, measuring the town's sleep and the boys' breathing. Willow Pass loved its euphemisms. "Kids are resilient," the church ladies said. And, "At least he's with family now," as if resilience were a sweater you could pull over a storm. Liam learned to echo the phrases that kept casseroles coming and questions away. He stored contraband brightness in a cigar tin, his father's challenge coin, a cardigan button that still remembered chalk dust, a summer photo where the river wore laughter, and so did they. At bedtime he counted breaths the way hikers count steps. 1 more, 1 more. And sometimes he imagined his heart as a small animal he had to carry carefully up a hill. The yellow house had 2 kinds of noise. By day, the domestic theater. Marla's list-making voice, as if naming bills could shrink them. The tidying that sounded like erasing. The praise that arrived on a schedule and left before it warmed. By night, Victor's pacing drew a groove in the hallway, his slippered steps rehearsing arguments with numbers. Sometimes a cabinet door snapped shut too hard, and silence stacked itself to the ceiling afterward. Liam mistook climate for character because he was 8, and because it hurt less. He tried to be good the way some boys try to be invisible. He lined up shoes with military precision under a coat rack too tall for him, returned dishes washed until his hands smelled like lemon and apology, and drank the nightly glass of milk even when the sweetness seemed thick as glue. When he could, he watched the firs. Somewhere out there, a shape older than Winter watched back. During the first Tuesday after winter break, the school reopened like a careful book. The sun was a hard white coin. Liam wore his father's jacket with the Carter patch, hem doubled and sleeves cuffed, and pulled his wool hat down over headquarters for frostbite, as his father used to joke. He listened the way good soldiers listen. He did not say that the word share in the story about bears felt like a spell adults cast when they wanted the cubs' honey. He took the counselor's handout about feelings as weather and wondered what to call a storm that never moved on. That evening, the town drew its curtains. Aegis set his chin to his paws and inventoried the night. At 7:15, a small figure arranging 2 green army men beneath a lamp. At 7:22, Marla entering with a tray, hair in the severe braid, mouth practicing kindness. At 7:29, a glass lifted, a boy obedient. At 7:31, the lamp went dark, and a silhouette approached the window to offer a shy 2-finger salute no one was meant to see. Aegis received it with a stillness so precise, it might have been prayer. The cold arranged itself around him in respectful layers. A coyote stitched a thin yip down in the flats. He let the thread fall. 2 teenagers crossed the trail laughing like tossed coins. He granted them their small immortality. In the long, shallow hour between 9 and 10, memory rose like heat. A desert road. Daniel's knuckles twice against the chest plate. Easy boy. The hot trumpet of ammonium nitrate where it didn't belong. Leash language. Left, left, steady, stop. His paws twitched in the snow. He woke to a kitchen light. Victor crossed the room, a broad silhouette paired by the lamp over the sink. He rinsed something. He stared too long at the window, hands braced as if arguing with his reflection might change the math. He vanished. Aegis lifted his nose and sorted the air. Pine sap, wood smoke, detergent with an optimistic floral, and then a thin thread that didn't belong to winter. Sweet bitter, faint as a rumor, the ghost of foxglove. The dog did not move yet. He allowed the wind to repeat itself. He listened for the second witness. Upstairs, a child's shadow crossed the window. The curtain parted the width of a palm. Liam's hand slid into the gap, small and pale, opening and closing twice. Question without words. Aegis stood. Every tendon translated in tension. Far inside the house, a delicate clink of glass against porcelain sounded once, then again, as if a sentence no one had written were about to acquire a period. Aegis angled his body toward the back steps, waited for the next sound, and heard, very lightly, too light for anyone not trained for danger, the soft scrape of a cabinet door easing shut. The wind shifted. The sweet, bitter thread grew clearer. In the upstairs dark, Liam lifted the glass to his mouth because he was good, because he had been told good boys drink their milk, because winter had a way of making rules seem warmer than they were. Aegis took 3 silent steps toward the fence, gathered himself like a spring, and looked up at the yellow square of window where a boy's silhouette paused, as if listening to something only dogs and children can hear. The night held its breath with the snow. Morning rang on the porch rails like a tuning fork, and fatigue settled on Liam as if winter had fastened an extra coat to his small shoulders. He moved slower, grew paler, let his appetite slide away like a conversation he no longer knew how to hold. At school, he pressed a palm to his chest when the rhythm skipped. He smiled because he was practiced at it. The school nurse, Miss Carolyn Robbins, a compact woman in her late 40s with a practical brown bob, kind eyes behind smudge-free lenses, and the steady warmth of someone who remembers every child's favorite bandage, noticed the gray smudge at his lips and the fine tremor in his fingers. She listened longer than most adults do, clipped a pulse ox, frowned, and called home. Marla arrived with a scarf the color of snowlight. Victor called from the truck to say he was on his way. At Birch Ridge Family Clinic, Dr. Asha Patel, early 50s, petite, dark hair in a loose braid, sleeves pushed above precise wrists, a face arranged for calm even when her eyes performed math, took the history and did not waste fear. The EKG hiccuped. The numbers frowned. Arrhythmia can be a bully, she told Liam, borrowing his father's word gently. We'll watch it. Holter monitor, blood work. If your lips turn blue, if you feel faint, you call 911. You are allowed to say this is scary. Marla nodded as if neatness might keep dread from spreading. Victor squared his jaw against the price of uncertainty. For 2 days, the weakness braided itself through Liam. He pushed noodles around his plate, drank the nightly glass because good boys obey. In the dark, Aegis lay in his notch among the firs, nose tasting the wind. Pine and wood smoke said winter. A thin, sweet, bitter thread whispered something he only knew from another life. On the 3rd night, the house tilted. A glass touched porcelain. A soft thud followed that wasn't dramatic, only wrong. Aegis cleared the fence like a verdict and shouldered through the back door as Victor spun, anger arriving before fear. Up the stairs, down the hall, into Liam's room. The boy lay skewed on the bed, mouth parted, lips the color of river ice. Aegis pressed his muzzle to the cool cheek and whined a sound carved between prayer and command, then barked 3 precise reports. Report, 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 aimed at the small geography of the heart. Marla's face went paper white. Victor, 911. The EMTs brought Winter in on their boots. Tess Alvarez, 29, sturdy and quick-eyed with a dark braid vanishing into a knit cap and a tiny fern tattoo at her thumb, spoke to Liam as if he were a collaborator in his own rescue. Oxygen, IV, mask. You're doing great, kiddo. The monitor sulked, the stretcher lifted, the ambulance's breath steamed the glass. Dr. Patel met them in the ER, with her voice honed to a blade. Tests, lines, guarded medicines, the if-then ladder of protocols. For a few hours, the numbers pretended to behave. Before dawn, they did not. Words arrived that people remember in fragments. Decompensation, arrest, we are doing everything. Then the ones that never make sense around a child. Willowpass put on its shared black suit. Father Brendan O'Rourke of St. Brigid's, 60, tall but thinning, freckled scalp polished by winter, hands careful as if every shoulder were breakable, came with prayers and a listening that did not hurry. May Hallowell from Hallowell Funeral Home, a compact woman in her late 50s with iron-gray hair in a twist and the posture of someone built for carrying other people's weight, handled details without stealing breath. Ray Kim from the White Ridge Veterans Association, 78, trim in a navy blazer with a neat row of service pins, a Korean War orphan made Montanan by luck and grit, brought a folded memorial cloth in marine colors and asked to place it on Liam's coffin in honor of his father's service. Marla agreed before the sentence ended. Victor nodded as if the assent had been his. Townspeople arrived with lilies, and the old habit of touching a shoulder as if that could keep a person from falling through. On the day of the viewing, the sky pressed low and white. St. Brigid's opened its red door like a small shout of mercy. Candles lined the aisle. The white coffin at the front looked too deliberate for a boy. Liam lay inside with his unruly cowlick tamed, lashes like parenthesis around silence. The memorial cloth draped the lid like a story adults tell to make another story bearable. The church pianist, Eleanor Finch, a tall, spare widow with silver hair in a bob and long fingers made for grooming chords out of sorrow, sat at the bench and let Psalm 23 walk on quiet feet. In the back pew, off-shift and snow-damp, Tess Alvarez folded cold hands under warm arms and couldn't shake the feeling that the puzzle had a missing piece. In the narthex, a pallbearer, Gus Pritchard, barrel-chested coal-dust eyebrows, the slow kindness of a man who has hauled bodies out of drifts, leaned on the doorframe. Victor gestured towards the side entrance where Aegis sat, forbidden but present, fur salted with snow, ears arrowed, eyes unblinking. "Keep that animal out," Victor muttered. Gus shrugged. "He ain't hurting nobody," which is how men here sometimes meant mercy. When Eleanor paused to smooth a wrinkle in the memorial cloth, Aegis rose as if pulled by wire. He threaded the side door, slid between coats, and reached the coffin in 3 clean strides. He didn't snarl. He did not scatter grief. He braced his paws on the edge and delivered 3 crisp barks over the exact geography of the heart, then lowered his head to listen, the way he had been taught when explosion and heartbeat had once shared the same neighborhood. The church made a sound that was not quite chaos. Gasps, a dropped hymn book, Father O'Rourke's "Now, now," Ray Kim's breath catching as if an old memory had stepped back into the room. Tess was already moving, because some bodies memorize the distance between doubt and action. Marla's voice rose sharp. "Get him off!" And then broke. Victor took a step that looked like anger and felt like fear. Aegis barked the same 3-beat report again, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the coffin as if reading a message inside wood. The front door swung wide and let in a slide of cold along with a man shaped by old campaigns. Jack Miller, 48, medium height, shoulders squared by habit, hair clipped close and peppered with gray, beard salted into honesty, eyes the blue of worn denim that has seen too many skies, stepped into the aisle. He wore an old field jacket patched at the elbow, boots whose creases remembered rain in languages not spoken here, and a gait that told the barometric truth of his knees. Afghanistan had left him a limp on hard mornings, and a ritual of cataloging exits before he breathed easy. He took in the map. Coffin, dog, priest, EMT, the set of Victor's jaw, the tremor in Marla's hand. and something behind his eyes aligned with a history not in this room. He didn't smile. He didn't hurry. He moved the way patient men move when they recognize a pattern. Aegis saw him and went statue still, the stillness old partners grant each other across a battlefield and a decade. Jack lifted his hand, not high, just enough for a trained dog to see, and said the first syllable of the word that had once meant stop, or stay, or listen. The candles guttered. The room leaned toward the coffin, as if the building itself were trying to hear what the dog could. The church inhaled, and Jack Miller let the old training take the wheel. "Everyone, step back," he said. Not loud, just the tone that turns panic into obedience. 48, medium height, shoulders squared by habit, hair clipped close and salted at the temples, Jack wore an old field jacket patched at the elbow. The beard that framed his jaw was trimmed but unvarnished, showing a chin that had done its share of clenching. His eyes, denim blue, watchful, did what they had done in Afghanistan. Read exits, weigh angles, count breaths. "Father," he said to Brendan O'Rourke, the tall, thinning priest with careful hands and a freckled scalp polished by winter, "I need your permission to approach." Father Brendan nodded once, surprise and trust sharing the same lane. Jack lifted his palm, a half sign any trained dog would remember. "Stay." And Aegis answered by going still, ears pinned, eyes locked on the lid. Jack's phone was already dialing. 911, he said. "St. Bridget's Church. Possible live subject in a coffin, pediatric. We need police and EMS now." He didn't say the word miracle. He said the words that make miracles possible. Protocol, consent, chain of custody. The front door swung again, shoving in cold and the sheriff of Willow Pass with it. Sheriff Tom Bradley, 52, broad through the chest, snow in a brown mustache cut to regulation, wore a tanned Stetson that carried scuffs like service stripes. He had rancher's hands, scarred knuckles, a split thumbnail, and a posture that suggested he settled arguments with posture before he used voice. Folks said he'd once pulled a boy from the river in spring flood, then pulled the boy's father out of a bottle the next winter by hiring him. Bradley's eyes were the color of old cedar, and they did not rattle easily. A step behind him, Deputy Mia Navarro, 30, lean as willow and fast as rumor, wore a dark braid down the back of her uniform and a mouth that smiled easily except when work began. "What have we got?" Bradley asked. "Former MWD signaling on the heart box," Jack answered, hand flat on the lid. "I'm requesting emergency access with priestly consent." Father Brendan raised both palms. "If there is breath, there is a soul to serve. You have my permission." Bradley's jaw made a single notch. "Navarro, start a perimeter. Keep hands off the scene, log names." He turned to the crowd, voice pitched to Carrie without shouting. "Folks, back up 2 pews. If you love this boy, give him air." The church obeyed. Gus Pritchard, the barrel-chested pallbearer with coal-dust brows, shouldered 2 men aside as gently as moving hay. Ray Kim, trim in his veteran's blazer, folded the memorial cloth with reverence and stepped away. Tess Alvarez, the sturdy, quick-eyed EMT with a dark braid and a fern tattoo at her thumb, materialized at the aisle's head, already gloving up. "Where's your partner?" Jack asked. "Close," she said. "He's parking the rig." The faint wail of the ambulance rounded in on itself like a promise. Jack slid his gaze to Marla and Victor. Marla's ash-blonde braid looked too tight to think. Her face had the chalk of milk and fear. Victor's big hands flexed on nothing, beard shadowing a jaw that wanted a problem it could punch. "We need next of kin consent," Bradley said, eyes on Jack while speaking to the Hales. "Open the casket. It's your call." Silence rearranged itself over the front pews. Marla's mouth worked, then held. Victor's throat jumped. Do it, he said too quickly, as if speed were virtue. Marla nodded like a hinge. Do it, she echoed, voice small, eyes on the priest as if borrowing his permission. Record it, Bradley told Navarro, who had already produced a body cam the size of a matchbox and pinned it to Jack's lapel. Chain is clean, she said, voice even. Proceed. Jack slid the catches with the care of a locksmith in a flood. The lid went light. Aegis's head lifted, nose working. Jack folded the lid back. The boy lay in the white quiet with his unruly cowlick tamed, lashes making parentheses around the stillness. Tess, Jack said. She was there, fingers at the carotid with the gentleness that suggests every neck reminds you of someone. I have something, she breathed, eyes widening, not theater but data. Faint and thready, respirations shallow. Airway, Jack said, already moving. Tess slid an oral airway with the grace of someone who has learned to borrow breath from moments. The second EMT, Devon Pike, 34, red-haired with a short, neat beard and broad forearms inked with a compass, and his daughter's name, arrived with the bag valve mask. Devon had the temperament of a man who speaks softly to engines and children and watches both until they purr. He sealed mask to face. Tess squeezed the bag in slow, sure compressions. O2 is on, Devon said. The monitor chirped to life, resentful and grudging. A heart too slow, a slope too shallow. Let's move him, Tess said. Sheriff? Go, Bradley answered, already clearing the aisle. Navarro, keep the crowd back. I don't want a single cell phone south of my elbow. Father Brendan stepped to one side, lips moving. Prayer, apology, gratitude. Sometimes they sound alike. Ray Kim held the memorial cloth in hands that had folded too many flags. Marla's fingers knotted a tissue into a wet rope. Victor stood tall the way trees stand in wind, more performance than strength. They slid the backboard under the small body with the respect of lifting an icon. Aegis placed his head on the boy's forearm for a single breath's length. Permission sought, permission given, and then dropped back to allow motion. As they pivoted, Eleanor Finch, the silver-haired pianist with long musician hands, struck a chord by accident, just the soft brush of cuff against keys, but it sounded like a bell that knew the name of the hour. The ambulance swallowed them into light, fluorescent and mercy-colored. Tess took the head. Devon took the bag. Jack climbed in without asking. You riding? Bradley asked, already knowing. Yes, sir. Then bring him back if you can, the sheriff said, stepping back as the doors gulped shut. Outside, sirens wound up, a staircase for angels. Inside, Tess counted. Devon breathed. Jack stabilized the airway with one palm and found the pulse again with the other, because belief has hands. Little man, Tess murmured, a field prayer, stay with me. The line on the monitor wobbled like a doubt learning to be an answer. As the rig jolted away, Bradley turned to the business that keeps miracles from being murdered. Navarro, he said, lock this down. Nobody in or out unless I know their mother's middle name. Get statements. Start with the aunt and uncle. Mia Navarro moved, tablet awake, voice turned to courtroom diction. Mrs. Hale, she said to Marla, who was smoothing her skirt the way people smooth the past. Walk me through the last 24 hours. Marla's gray eyes blinked once too long. He was tired, she said. The clinic said arrhythmia. We were so careful. Her voice, already brittle, flaked. He drank his milk. He went to bed. Victor stepped in. Officer, we've done nothing wrong. His height arrived first. His words arrived clipped. This is an outrage. And yet, Navarro said gently, we will need your cooperation. She glanced at Bradley, who had gone still in the way of men who smell a storm. He did not look at the coffin. He looked at the side aisle, at the scuffed floor where dog claws had scratched a geography, at the tray abandoned on a pew, an arrangement of paper cups and tissues and grief. "Gus," he said, "close those doors. Ray, stay with Father." Aegis remained at the nave's edge, chest heaving, snow thawing on his coat into dark circles. He stared at the space the stretcher had occupied, then up at Bradley as if sending a report not in human grammar. Target moved, proceed to next objective. Bradley nodded once, an old cowboy salute to a soldier on 4 legs. "Good boy," he said, the words equal parts praise and oath. The church exhaled. Somewhere a phone finally remembered to ring. Somewhere a child's cry reminded the room that this was a place people brought their whole lives. There was a sound then, small enough to miss if you did not have a sentry's ears. The scuff of cloth on wood from the empty front, like a breath trapped in the lid, had finally gone looking for a door. In the ambulance, beneath fluorescent mercy, Liam's chest hitched, as if some memory had tugged a thread. Aegis, 300 yards away, lifted his head and answered with a low, hopeful whine that made Father Brendan close his eyes and whisper, "Amen," to no one in particular. Snow scratched at the ER windows like radio static, while machines spoke in green syllables over a child's stubborn heartbeat. In Bay 3, Liam lay under forced air warmers. His chest rose as if winter itself were lending him breath. Dr. Asha Patel kept vigil until the pediatric intensivist arrived. Dr. Omar Reyes, 39, compact and square-jawed, black hair clipped tight, a permanent 5 o'clock shadow that made him look carved from long shifts. Reyes's voice refused panic. His hands moved with the expensive grace of saved seconds. He checked pupils, murmured to nurses, and called in the toxicologist, Dr. Lila Nguyen, 42, slender, navy scrubs immaculate, hair in a clean bun, eyes that counted facts like beads. "Screen is running," Lila said, studying the cassette when a violet band bloomed like a bruise. "Positive for cardiac glycoside. Digoxin. High for his size." Reyes nodded once. "Order digoxin fab." The antitoxin hung cold from a pole. Nurses spiked the vial while Reyes steadied the line. "Stay with me, little man," he said in ICU dialect, which means I am not letting go. Across town, Sheriff Tom Bradley stepped from his cruiser into a wind that filed his mustache to iron. Deputy Mia Navarro matched his stride to the Hale property. At the back fence, Aegis waited, ears arrowed, steam puffing from his chest, then surged to Jack Miller, not with joy but with purpose, pivoting toward the shed, the fence line, the snow bin, a corridor of scent. Bradley didn't waste skepticism. "We do it right," he said. Navarro had her tablet already lit, building a warrant as they walked. Pediatric near death, medical suspicion of poisoning, trained dog indicating, exigency to preserve evidence. Judge Harriet Cole, 61, square-shouldered, gray pixie cut, half-moon readers perched like a verdict, appeared by video from a kitchen dusted with flour. She was a former public defender who liked clean stories and cleaner chains of custody. Bradley swore in. Navarro summarized. "Limited scope," Judge Cole ruled. "Exterior grounds, outbuildings and refuse, for toxic agents and contaminated containers. Log every wrapper like it's contraband gold." Aegis led them to the tool shed wall, where a fresh black contractor bag perched like a bad idea reconsidered. With body cam rolling, Bradley teased the knot and peeled the plastic. Winter exhaled a faint, sweet, bitter ghost. Inside, an amber vial with a torn label, a blister sheet punched to moons, a white porcelain mortar and pestle-dusted pail, a ceramic mug with a milk-tied ring, paper towels freckled yellow, and a folded pharmacy receipt. Navarro photographed, bagged, and labeled. "Field swipe?" Bradley asked. The card turned warning pink for cardiac glycosides. "Receipt reads Birchridge Pharmacy," Mia said, tweezers steady. "Digoxin 0.25 milliliters. Cash, 2 days before symptoms." She called the number. Eric Loomis, late 20s, acne scars like Morse. On an earnest face, answered behind plexiglass and racks of gum. He had the weary brightness of small-town clerks who know everyone's middle name and history. "Cash dig?" he repeated, thinking. Right before closing. Tall guy, trimmed beard, smelled like diesel and pine sol, wrote Victor Hale, Guardian, on pickup. When Mia asked about ID, shame heated his cheeks. "We were slammed. I'll do better." "Hold the log," she said, not unkind. Back at the yellow house, Bradley presented the warrant. Marla's ash-blonde braid looked tight enough to squeak. Her smile was a paper thing in the rain. Victor stood behind her, arms folded to manufacture certainty. Aegis sat at heel, eyes fixed on Victor with the patience of an old sergeant taking roll. "Your housekeeper," Navarro said. "Name and hours." "Nora. Nora Pierce," Marla said, the R snagging. 2 streets over, they found Nora in a basement unit that smelled of bleach and violets. Nora Pierce, 45, round-shouldered from other people's laundry, hair a dull brown tied pinned loosely, hands mapped by work, knuckles cracked, lotion failing to catch up. Her eyes held equal parts fear and relief. Mia read the advisement. Nora's voice came small. "He said the boy was sick. Miss Marla told me to warm the milk, leave it by the door. The milk smelled flowery and wrong. The next night I saw Mr. Victor at the sink with a little white bowl, chip like a tooth, grinding. He poured the powder into the milk and said, 'Can't taste a thing.' I should have told someone. I was scared of losing hours. They argued about money, leases, payments, like numbers were prayers." Details zipped to the shed finds. Mortar, mug, the trash. She signed each page with careful loops. At the hospital, the lab courier sprinted the sacks upstairs. Lila's confirmatory instruments would sing later. For now, the screens agreed with the field. Digoxin present, pattern of repeated small dosing, then a push. Reyes watched the monitor relearn its song. The heart rate crept from too low to low, blood pressure from whisper to murmur. "Fab's binding," he said. "We're not clear, but we've got a handhold." Bradley stepped into a quiet alcove and called a number he kept for storms. Special Agent Dana O'Neill answered on the second ring. 46, tall and sure-footed, hair natural in a close halo, suit lines clean as decisions. A former collegiate sprinter, she moved and spoke like someone who enjoyed beating time to the punch. "White-collar and healthcare fraud," she said. "What are we chasing?" Bradley laid fence lines. Child revived from a coffin, positive digoxin screen, physical evidence of crushing and dosing, pharmacy cash pickup logged to the Guardian, financial stressors, possible life insurance and federal survivor benefits in play. Mia slid a folder under his hand. A Wyoming-based policy with interstate payments, guardianship letters naming Victor as payee for Liam's benefits until 18. "Interstate commerce plus fraud equals us," Dana said. "Email your packet. I'll open the case. Don't spook your suspects. I'll be on the road in 2 hours. If you book them, I'll drop a federal hold." Bradley hung up and looked through glass at Bay 3, where a small hand lay palm up, as if offering the world one more chance to behave. Jack stood at the threshold, field jacket faint with oil and winter, watching the rise and fall that had become the town's metronome. Aegis, allowed in the corridor by exception, lay sphinx still with his nose aimed at Liam's skin like a compass at true north. A nurse passed with a blanket, another with quiet boots and a chart. The sheriff crouched and laid a palm on the shepherd's head. "We heard you," he said, an oath more than praise. "Now we let the math catch up." When Bradley returned to the house, Victor tried on outrage the way some men try on coats that don't fit. "You can't accuse—" "We haven't," Bradley said. "We've collected facts." Marla reached for the back of a chair she didn't sit in. "How is he?" she asked. And for a half-second, the question sounded like it belonged to someone who could have loved a different life. Bradley's voice stayed even. "Fighting." In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from Reyes. HR 72. Pressure improving. Another buzz. "Lila, confirm underway. Pattern consistent with dosing over several days." The winter light thinned to pewter. In the ICU, Liam's eyelashes fluttered like moth wings remembering summer. Then stilled, then fluttered again. Far away, but not far enough. A siren shifted key. The federal car finding the mountain roads. And in its wake, Aegis exhaled. A low sound, not quite a prayer, not quite a report, but enough to make Jack's eyes go bright with a hope he didn't yet trust with words. Winter loosened its grip on Willow Pass the way an old hand releases a railing. Slowly, with a last squeeze to be sure it can let go. In the ICU's blue hour, Liam's heart learned its song again. Monitors quieted until they were less a siren and more a metronome. Dr. Omar Reyes, beard-shadowed and unblinking, signed the note that moved the boy from critical to step-down. Dr. Lila Nguyen, neat as a ledger, finalized the toxicology report that threaded dose to intent. On the Laws side of the river, Special Agent Dana O'Neill arrived in a long slate coat that made hallways part. She spoke softly, but the words carried weight, and when she sat across from Sheriff Tom Bradley and Deputy Mia Navarro, the table felt level. The state picked up the ball. Assistant District Attorney Ruth Calder, 43, compact and flinty, hair the color of walnut bark, approached every file like a fence to be tightened. Her voice had a ranchwoman's cadence, spare, exact, and a dislike for melodrama that made juries lean closer. She charged attempted murder of a child, conspiracy, and insurance fraud, with a federal coordinator stapled to the back for the interstate policy. Public defender. Alan Voss, 50, tall and gaunt with a saxophonist's long fingers and a face that looked permanently underslept, took the hails. He wore thrift store suits with defiant neatness and treated even the worst decisions as stories that might yet be told without venom. The arraignment was brief. Wood benches, fluorescent honesty, the smell of old paper and cold wool. Marla stood in a cream sweater that tried to advertise innocence. The ash-blonde braid now looked like something she clung to more than something she wore. Victor kept his jaw set, trimmed beard like a frame around a picture he refused to update. Judge Marisol Klein, 58, medium height, silver hair in a low twist, glasses on a chain and patience in her spine, presided. Klein had been a family court magistrate before criminal docket, and it showed in the way her voice carried both gravity and a memory of lullabies. Bail was denied. The words fell without malice. Outside the courthouse, snow eddied in alleys like secrets that had decided to move along. Liam woke fully 2 mornings later to the gentle occupation of daylight and the warm weight of Aegis's head on the mattress edge. The hospital had made an exception. Some rules break themselves for the right reasons. Aegis, fur gold and ink, right ear nicked, eyes the dark comfort of coffee, held position like a saint carved from breathing. Liam's first sentence was small. "You waited," he said, as if the past tense could hold what the present could not. Jack Miller, lean in his patched field jacket, stood with hands that didn't know where to rest. There is a way men who have lost too much learn to hold joy. Lightly, like a bird that might startle. "We're here," he said. which was both inventory and promise. Caseworker Elise Moran from Child and Family Services arrived that afternoon to start the next chapter. Elise was 36, medium height with a curving posture that made children listen. Dark curls framed a face set to empathetic by default, but her eyes kept a clear ledger of harms and safeties. She introduced herself without a clipboard between them. "Liam," she said, "my job is to make sure home means safe. We can take our time, but I want to talk about where you'd like to be when the doctors say yes." Liam looked at Jack, then at Aegis, then at the window where Winter practiced leaving. "With him," he said, "and him." Elise nodded like someone receiving a sacred object. "Then we'll build the bridge correctly," she said. "Bridges take paperwork." Over the next weeks, the town learned the patience of signatures. Ada Calder consolidated the state charges. Dana O'Neill's team stapled banking records and emails into a braid the defense couldn't unpick. Nora Pierce, round-shouldered cardigan pilled to softness, testified to the milk and the mortar with a voice that remembered fear and chose clarity anyway. She cried once. Mia Navarro handed her a tissue and a nod that meant the truth had weight, and she had carried it well. In court, Ruth Calder's style was cold water. Dates, doses, receipts, camera stills of a man at the shed at 12:41 a.m. Victor's lawyer tried to pull the blanket of confusion across intent. It didn't reach the corners. When verdict day came, Judge Klein spoke like winter breaking. Guilty on all counts. Consecutive terms put the arithmetic far past early parole. Klein turned to Nora in open court to acknowledge cooperation. The sentence memo recommended leniency for her immigration and employment concerns, where the law permitted. When the gavel's echo migrated into the hall, a quiet fell that was less silence than room for breath. At the hospital, Liam's progress moved from wires to wireless. Dr. Reyes signed the medical clearance for animal-assisted aftercare, and the hospital's therapy coordinator, Benji Rourke, 27, broad-shouldered and shy, freckles like a galaxy across his nose, an ex-high school linebacker who discovered he preferred coaxing pain into play. Administered the practical exam Aegis never knew he would ace. Heal through hallways, ignore dropped crackers, rest on command. Benji stamped the forms with a grin that made him look 13. "Certified as Liam's alert chalked companion," he said. "You're legal, Sergeant." The guardianship hearing smelled like lemon oil and old civics. Judge Klein presided again, this time with the softness family law allows. Elise Moran presented a home study, photos of a small cabin at Forest's Hem, a tidy kitchen, a bedroom with a dinosaur quilt, a yard that looked like a promise of forts. She added Jack's service record, not as heroism but as history, and the letters from teachers who spoke of how the boy's smile had started to come back, cautiously, like wildlife at the edge of a clearing. Jack stood in a plain blue shirt that fit his shoulders like a compromise with age. He answered softly and directly. "Why you?" Klein asked. Jack didn't reach for poetry. "Because I am already here," he said, "and because I know how to stand between a child and what wants to hurt him." Aegis lay at Jack's boot, nose toward Liam, as if the compass point had been agreed. Klein's ruling placed temporary guardianship that same day. The adoption petition would ripen with the calendar. When the papers were signed, Liam traced the raised seal with a fingertip as if learning the texture of a new country. Home was a cabin at the forest's beginning, where Birch Lane forgot itself and turned to path. The first night back, Jack cooked stew that tasted like yes. The house learned the new sound of a boy's feet. Aegis toured the perimeter 3 times, then lay by the hearth in a position that declared the perimeter satisfied. On the shelf, Liam set 3 objects: the Marine Corps coin his father had given him, A small cardboard angel Father O'Rourke had pressed into his palm with a prayer that didn't demand belief to function, and a smooth river stone that fit exactly between thumb and forefinger. His mother's, for classroom paper stacks and courage. Snow arrived for its encore in late December. Elise came by with final papers wrapped in a neutral binder and stayed for cocoa. She wore rain boots dotted with daisies that made bureaucracy look almost friendly. "It's official," she said. "Home is home." Jack's hand shook only once when he signed. Liam signed too, carefully, the letters leaning toward one another like children who have decided to be best friends. That evening, the town practiced remembering what it liked about itself. Sheriff Bradley and Deputy Navarro stopped by for 5 minutes that turned into an hour. Ada Calder brought a pie she swore she hadn't baked, and then admitted she absolutely had. Father O'Rourke blessed the door with laughter, which is also holy water. Ray Kim from the Veterans Hall presented a shadow box, a small marine patch, a folded memorial cloth ribbon, and a brass tag engraved Daniel Carter. Service continues. "He'd be proud of your watch, son," Ray told Aegis, scratching the nicked ear. When the visitors left and the cabin settled, Liam stood on a chair to hang one last thing. His father's old unit pin, still bright near the top of the tree. The lights caught, the room inhaled. Jack told a story he had been saving for when the world felt sturdy. About Daniel's terrible knock-knock jokes, about the day Aegis pulled a patrol away from a culvert that wanted to be a grave. About the way courage sometimes looks like listening harder than anyone else knows how. Liam leaned against him the way trust leans. Not heavy, but real. "What do we do when we're scared?" Jack asked softly. Liam considered. "Say it out. Loud," he said, remembering Dr. Patel's permission. "And ask for help." "What else?" "Tell the truth," Liam said, thinking of Nora. "Even if it shakes." Aegis thumped his tail once, a low percussion that gave the lesson rhythm. Outside, the first true flakes of the season came down like new rules written in powder. Liam opened the door to watch them take the yard. The forest answered with a hush older than language. He lifted his face to the cold. Aegis leaned against his leg. Jack stood behind, a steady shape. On the porch rail, snow began to make a clean ledger of the year. The past did not vanish. It put on white and agreed to be part of the view. Inside, the tree lights held steady. Somewhere in the timberline, a fox barked, brief as a blessing. And if the wind carried what sounded like a far-off howl answering back, Liam chose to hear it as thanks. When the snow finally settled over Willow Pass, it felt like a small, ordinary miracle, the kind God hides in plain sight. Not thunder or parted seas, just a faithful dog who wouldn't give up, a child who kept breathing, and a few people who chose courage over comfort. Maybe that's how grace works most days. In the steady hands, the hard truth told kindly, the neighbor who knocks, the "I'm here" that arrives right on time. Carry that into your tomorrow. Listen a little closer. Speak up when something feels wrong. Put mercy on your calendar like any other appointment. And when fear whispers that you are small, remember, small is exactly the size God uses to move mountains. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment with a moment you witnessed quiet courage. Subscribe to the channel so these stories of loyalty and light keep finding you and the people you love. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.